The study session for the Aurora City Council for Monday, November 15, 2021 is called to order. Will the clerk please read the roll?
Mayor Kaufman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bergen?
Here.
Councilmember Berzins?
Here.
Councilmember Coombs?
Present.
Councilmember Gardner?
Here.
Councilmember Gruber?
Here.
Councilmember Hiltz?
Here.
Councilmember Marcano?
Present.
Councilmember Lawson?
Here.
And Councilmember Murillo?
Present.
There's a quorum. And Mayor, can we do the announcement?
Yes, please proceed.
Good evening. Thank you for joining tonight's Aurora City Council study session. If you are listening on the phone, please note public comments are not taken during study sessions. The phone line is in listen-only mode. City Council welcomes comments from residents at regular council meetings on both matters appearing on the agenda and during public invited to be heard. Sign-up opens on those evenings at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Mayor Berzins.
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. Can I ask a question for legal before we get started with the questions?
Please proceed.
Okay. I see several lawyers on here. We did decide that our candidates for this committee would be screened from now on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, is that social media screening too or not?
And I'm going to let the city clerk answer because they actually did the backgrounds on this.
Okay.
So they're different. Even within the city, there are a variety of levels that we go through, and I'm not sure which level we actually used for the commissioners.
Okay.
So
will all the candidates for this committee from now on be told that if you put your name in the pot and you're chosen for an interview that you will be screened?
absolutely, that's a requirement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, Katie.
That's okay. I was just gonna say on the application, it does state that they're gonna have a criminal background check and it might become public record. So it is on the application. And also after council chooses who they would like to interview, I send a memo to those applicants and it outlines the criminal background check process and when they can withdraw their application if they wish to not move forward and have the criminal background check done and made public if we have a public records request for it.
That was my next statement. So somebody can file a CORA and get their background checked. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for letting me ask that.
Mayor, if I might do a follow-up.
Yes, please proceed. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. And I guess for Katie as well. I think last week, because we had some issues last interview round, were we not going to do the Google search?
So what we presented during the study session was to include the additional questions on the application that council requested and also to do the criminal background check. And so that is what we did. And we made sure, that they fit the qualifications as being an Aurora resident, a registered voter. And so that's the background check that the city did. We did not conduct any kind of Google search on applicants.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very well. This is how we'll proceed. I will recognize each of the three applicants for a 2-minute overview of their background and why they're interested in the position. Then I'll go to questions. I would ask that each council member and the Mayor Pro Tem ask the same question in the same manner to each candidate out of fairness. And then I will conclude by recognizing each of the candidates for 2 minutes for their closing statement. So with that, Mr. Thomas Mays is the first candidate to be interviewed. We bring Mr. Mays up.
And Mayor, Mr. Mays is online right now and his video is up.
Okay, very well. Mr. Mays, well, I can't see him though. How was that? Katie, I don't have a visual on Mr.
Mayor,
Mays.
if you go to layout on the top
Okay.
right of Cisco WebEx and change it to grid, you might be able to see him.
I think he'll also
Yes.
pop up when he's
Very well. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mays, you are now recognized for 2 to introduce yourself and give an overview of your background and why you're interested in this position.
Well, good evening, and thank you for giving me an opportunity. My name is Thomas Mays. I'm a Aurora resident. I've been in Aurora now, a resident in Aurora since 1984. Work closely with the Aurora Police Department and the Fire Department and various commissions with the city. I am very much active in my community. I've worked closely with I think 4 different police chiefs and worked on the recruiting side of it. My daughter was at one time an Aurora police officer. She was one of the first recruits that I can credit my efforts to, so I'm excited about that. I am pastor of the Living Water Christian Center, where I've pastored the last 34 years. I'm part of the Aurora Key Community Response Team, one of the charter members when it was founded back in 1991. Work closely with the NAACP, I'm their religious affairs chair, and I enjoy the opportunity to better my community. That's what I've been doing for many years, working with the homeless, trying to make sure that they are fed, especially along the Colfax corridor where our church is. We work with the residents of the different motels, even before we started the renovation of redevelopment of the Colfax corridor. So I work closely with that, work closely with the Job Link project, hooked up with the Anschutz community to get jobs to some immigrants and some people with low income, to get them in their foot in the door in low income jobs, but at the same time providing training so they would understand that the possibility of upward mobility. So those are some of the reasons why some of the activities I've been involved in. The reason I would like to be on the Civil Service Commission is because I feel like our Aurora Police is probably one of the finest that we've ever had. I worked with the All America City project, traveled on behalf of both the Aurora Police and the city of Aurora, ensuring that people know that we have one of the finest police departments. I want to ensure that they don't get a bad rap. I want to ensure that they never get defunded and that they are supported by our community and by our city government in every way that it can. At the same time, maintaining that balance with the community to ensure that the community's voice is being heard with the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie, are you timing these?
Yes, I am.
Okay, because that was, appreciate his introduction, but it was over 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. I was just giving him a few more seconds to finish. So I'll give the next candidate a few more seconds as well.
Now, when you're talking about 3 minutes, is that 3 minutes from the beginning of the question, or 3 minutes simply for the answer?
That would be 3 minutes, including the question and answer.
Very well. Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mays, for joining us tonight and for applying for this very important commission. My question is, when commissioners conduct disciplinary hearings, do you think that they should consider public opinion when making those decisions, and what information would you consider?
I would consider community input. I don't know that I would consider just opinion. Input would be those given that are actually facts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Certainly.
Councilmember Berzins, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. And this is a two-parter. As you know, Mr. Mays, and thank you for being here tonight. Our candidates will be screened before we vote on our choice. We just discussed that. Is there anything you're currently doing or in the past involved with that might make you being on the Civil Service Commission questionable to us or the media?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay, thank you. Do you feel like you can be completely objective in hearings and in discipline appeals?
Absolutely, I believe I can, and I know that I will. That's one of my strong points of being open-minded and being fair. I'm many times called the balanced man.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Coombs, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Mays, for joining us this evening for this interview. My question is around the investigations that the city has conducted and has undergone from other entities. Most, if not all of them, have placed pretty significant scrutiny on the operations of the Civil Service Commission. So should changes be required of the Civil Service Commission and to the way the Civil Service Commission operates, how will you adapt to any changes?
Well, it would not really be a lot of adapting necessary in that most of those changes probably will take place very quickly. I am a person who likes to go by the letter of the law. However the changes come in, I work with those. I'm not a fighter to fight the changes. I am a person to believe in the letter of the law, which is determined by the people through their votes and through the city council in their decisions that they make. I align myself with those decisions. I don't hold back my opinion. In fact, there's been times when I've been told that I'm brutally honest. So I will certainly give my opinion, but whatever is decided by the majority, that's the way our country has been run for years, and it's run, I think it's ran pretty well. So I will be able to go with the majority and adapt to whatever our city, our community, our city council, and our government adheres to.
Councilmember Gardner, you're now recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, Pastor Mays. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
My question, what unique skill set or strengths do you bring to the commission that other candidates might not?
Well, not knowing the other candidates, it's difficult to answer that, what they may not have. I know my strong suit is my community involvement and experience, but also within the military as a Vietnam veteran, my expertise was an administrative specialist. So I'm very acutely aware of how important it is to fine tune everything that we say and everything that we do, and that we understand the ins and outs of our responsibilities and our accountability. So I'm not sure what their strong suits might be or what I may have that they don't have, but I do have the experience working with the city, both on both sides of the city and the community, and also my skills as an administrator and a trainer as a leader. So I do leadership training with the John Maxwell program. So I have those things, and I think those are my strong suits.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Gruber, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Good evening, Pastor Mays.
Good evening.
Could you describe any experience you have in mediation processes between management and labor organization?
With labor organizations, we're referring to the unions. I have not been involved in any mediation between any employer and their union, or I'm very much a union person. I've worked 17 years with the government, besides my 6 years in military, and we had a strong union within the Postal Service where I gave 17 years. So I work closely with the unions there. So I'm a union man.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hiltz, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. We heard a little bit about why it is you wanted to apply for the Civil Service Commission. And my question is, what do you hope to accomplish during your term?
I hope to accomplish very close analysis of where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. I want to be, I consider myself a change agent, so I want to be a part of any change that has to take place, our government feels needs to take place to make our city continue to be one of the greatest cities in the United States, an all-American city. So I think where I am at this point, my desire is to be a part of positive change, and I'm sure that I can do that.
Councilmember Lawson, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Mays, for being here. I appreciate your time. My question is to you is, what reforms do you think the commission should consider within the current civil service application process that it could improve the deficit of diversity in our police and fire academies and department?
I'm careful to answer that, but I would say any type of, I like it to be more governmental and not political. And I'm listening to some of the scuttlebutt, I'll put it like that, during the time that the applications are out there and people are talking about it. It became a bit politicized, and I don't do the political part. I really love that it just stay community and government. Our government works for our community, and our community works along with the government, rather than it become any type of political issue. I love for it to be truly bipartisan. That's my heart.
Thank you, Dr. Mays. I appreciate your answer.
Councilmember O'Connell, you are now recognized for 3 minutes. Councilmember O'Connell, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so thank you, Dr. Mays, for joining us this evening and for your interest in serving on the Civil Service Commission. So could you describe the current involvement of the Civil Service Commission in the hiring and backgrounding process? And what, if anything, would you like to see changed in that process?
The hiring and I think the process, I understand it to be with the Civil Service Commission, that it's more of an investigative type of entity to ensure that we get the finest. People are qualified. Disciplinary, I think right now they review everything that the police chief would give out as far as a discipline. And they give back their recommendations, and then they make the final decision on whether the discipline is appropriate. The only thing that I know right now, but as I would get in the office, certainly I would know more in detail. Right now, the only thing that I see that I would try to understand or even try to change, and that is that the police chief would have more leeway in the hiring process and in the disciplinary process, that they would be the person that could say the buck stops here. So the relationship between the Civil Service Commission and the police chief, I would like to see that to be a closer relationship so that they would be on the same page somewhat, while they can maintain their individuality at the same time. But I think the police chief who works with the rank and file understands them probably a little better than the Civil Service Commission.
All right, thank you, sir.
Councilmember Murillo, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Pastor Mays, for joining us tonight. I appreciate your application and your dedication to the city. My question is, can you tell me about a time that your ethics were challenged and how you resolved that situation?
Where my ethics were challenged, I have pretty solid ethics. I think they were challenged during the time that I ran for city council, in that I am a Christian, and that's, I don't apologize for that. So I'm apologetically Christian, and I stand for those standards and those ethics, and I stand strong. Where I don't challenge anyone else's decisions, anyone else's beliefs, I don't allow mine to be compromised. I will not compromise what I believe in. Understanding that I have an opportunity, especially working with the city, to make sure I can keep separate religion and government. That's important. But at the same time, my personal ethics, they require me to be honest in everything that I say and everything that I do, and to be forthcoming in everything that I demonstrate, the deeds I perform, the words that I speak. They have to be within my beliefs.
Mr. Mays, thank you so much for applying for this position. You now have 2 minutes for any additional comments. Your closing remarks, please.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you, first of all, for even considering me and allowing me to apply. Thank you for the hard work that our city does. The city council, our mayor, city manager, all of those, and city attorneys. I look at the work you do, and I want you to know I appreciate you. I appreciate the efforts, the sacrifices, and I, too, am one of those people who don't mind sacrificing and giving of myself. I am a person who fell in love with the work in my community, not the title, not the position, but the work. And I know it takes a lot of work to make a community. I believe in the village concept. It takes a village, it takes all of us. And I believe wholeheartedly we're better together. So I have one great quality that God has blessed me with, and that is the ability to listen and hear and understand everyone, whoever they are, wherever they are, however they are, and accept people as they are. We're better together, and we can do it if we work together. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Desmond McNeil.
We are getting him on the meeting right now, Mayor. Just one moment, please.
Sure.
Mr. McNeil, can you go ahead and, there you go. Thank you.
Desmond McNeil, thank you for applying for the Civil Service Commission. Please introduce yourself and give a 2-minute overview of your background and why you're interested in this position.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Desmond McNeil. I'm a father of 2. My daughter's name is Amaya, my son Desmond Jr. I grew up in Aurora, Colorado. I've been in public service for almost 20 years. So I'm a paramedic. I'm in leadership in EMS currently. I went to Smoky Hill High School, graduated from there. I went to the Community College of Aurora. I graduated from Metropolitan State University of Denver. Kind of a local boy through and through, even though I wasn't born here. Like I said, I've been in EMS for roughly 20 years, and it just seems that lately, I just feel like I can help. I feel like I have a background in public service. I've worked with PD and firemen my entire career. I feel like I have a background to really relate to them, and being in leadership myself, I feel like I know what it takes to interview and kind of pick out some of the good apples out there for people for these jobs, and also for promotions and moving up into the different departments. I have a lot of varying experience in EMS. I've worked overseas. I've worked locally in the Denver metro area. I've worked down in Colorado Springs. I'm in leadership currently. I just feel like I can really help and bring a different perspective to this role when it comes to hiring and dealing with our public servants.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McNeil, for applying for the Civil Service Commission. This is a very important commission, so thank you. My question is, when commissioners conduct disciplinary hearings, do you think that they should consider public opinion when making their decisions, and what information would you consider?
So that's very tricky, because public information, probably 50% of the time, is inaccurate. Most of public information comes from the news and the media sources. So I think accurate information needs to be considered. And if that's also public, then that's fine. But I think the important thing is that the truth is considered, and that you get all the information from both sides. There's always at least 2 sides to each story, so that you get all the information before you can make a decision on disciplinary actions. There's also, and it's one of the reasons I've applied to this, is you have to have knowledge of the job itself when you consider disciplinary actions. In EMS, one of the things we always consider when we look at negligence is that would somebody else with the same training do what you did? So I think that's very important when you talk about disciplinary actions, that you consider, is this something, somebody else in your position would do? And then, I mean, public opinion is good, but it's got to be an educated opinion, and it's got to be based on the truth.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Persons, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McNeil. We appreciate your time being here and your application. This is a 2-part question. As you know, our Civil Service Commission candidates will be screened before we vote on our choice. Is there anything you're currently involved with, or in the past maybe you've been involved with, that might make you being on the Civil Service Commission questionable, either to us or social media?
No, I don't think so. My social media is pretty quiet. I'm on Twitter, but I kind of just learned to use it a couple years ago, and I don't really post. My Facebook is mostly memes, so I just try to joke and stuff on my Facebook. I don't feel like anything on there is insensitive. I don't feel like anything would be embarrassing to me or, my family, my brand, however you want to describe it. I try to avoid doing that, because I am in leadership. So everything I do reflects back on the company I work for. So if I say something crazy online, it could always come back around. So I try to avoid it.
Thank you. That's good. Second part is, do you feel like you can be completely objective in hearings and disciplinary appeals?
Yes. So I feel like, and I've always described this to my my father, for lack of a better way to describe this, is that I feel like I have a high moral code. I try to base everything on what's right and wrong and not personal opinion. So I want to get down to the truth. I want to get down to what's right in each situation. And I feel like if you're going to discipline somebody, and especially what we're talking about is somebody's livelihood. So if we're saying that we're going to discipline a firefighter or a cop, we're talking about potentially them losing their job. So it's important that you find the truth. And nothing's higher than that. And it can't be about personal opinion. You've got to be, separate from that. And it's just got to be, what's the truth?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Coombs, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McNeil, for joining us this evening. My question is about the Civil Service Commission itself. Through the investigations that the city has commissioned, as well as other investigations that we've been subject to, the Civil Service Commission has come under pretty heavy scrutiny in terms of its operations. So if you're appointed, how will you adapt to any changes that may result from that scrutiny?
So I assume you are referring to the Attorney General report, amongst other things. I think you have to be flexible. I think you have to move forward. I think accountability is important. And that right now, both of our civil service agencies have lost public trust. So right now they're questioning the police department. They're also questioning the fire department, because if you read the report, which I'm sure you all have, it says that they haven't been operating to the standard that we expect. So I think changes are going to come forward, and that we have to adjust to them to regain that trust and that respect in our public services. You have to be flexible moving forward. We just have to be.
Thank you. Councilmember Gardner, you're now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil, for your application and being here tonight. My question, what unique skill set or strengths would you bring to the commission that other candidates might not?
So I can only describe myself just because I don't know them, but I think the unique aspect that I bring is that I have 20 years of public service experience. I think as a paramedic for the last 20 years, and that includes, I started right around 9/11. So, and I've been around the world working in medicine, and I've been around the country doing the same thing. I feel like I bring a unique perspective because of that. I bring somebody who's done the job, who's worked with these people, who's been on the street. So I've been around good cops, I've been around bad cops, I've been around good medicine, and I've been around bad medicine. So I know the difference, and I know the standard. And I think it's important to have a voice in the room when these topics come up that can say, yeah, a medic shouldn't do that, or that's not the standard that we want to hold them to, or perhaps PD shouldn't do that, and that's not the standard we want to hold them to, or they did a great job. This is exactly how we want to operate, and maybe it wasn't pretty, but this is what we're supposed to do. So I think uniquely, I bring that perspective, because I can't imagine you have a lot of candidates that have the same background I have in public service.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Gruber, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. McNeil, thank you for being with us tonight. Can you describe any experience you have in mediation processes between management and a labor organization?
I'm sorry, my sound just dropped out. Could you say that again, please?
Sure. Can you describe any experience you have in mediation process between management and a labor organization?
Not a labor organization. Now, I've had to mediate between employees and management above me. It's not exactly the same. I feel like in all situations, you've got to get information from both sides, and you have to figure out what people want, and then try to mediate the differences between what's acceptable and what's not, and find a middle ground between both parties to try to, you can't please everybody, but you've got to find a way to make it feel like everybody won when you come out of a negotiation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Councilmember Hills reached out to me and is having some family things to deal with, a little emergency. And so I'm going to come back to her, and I'd like to change the order and go to Councilmember Lawson next, please.
Hello, Mr. McNeil. Thank you for applying for the commission, and I'm glad that you are here. My question to you is, what reforms do you think the commission should consider within the current civil service application process that could improve the deficit of diversity in our police and fire academies and department?
Diversity is very important. It's a passion of mine. I think some of the ideas is the outreach. So I think you've got to reach out to minorities and let them know about some of these jobs. I know, and honestly, I don't have an answer for diversity for the police department. I feel like the fire department, it's always, you just have to open it up, and you've got to do more outreach to get people through the door. These are quality jobs on both sides of the fence. Police and fire department are quality jobs that people want. So you've got to get it out there that it's a good job. It's got good benefits. You're doing a service to your community. I feel like there are a lot of people who want to do these jobs, and we need to get out to them that it's a good job, and we're going to get trust back. We're going to back you when our back's against the wall. We're going to stand by you, and this is a good job. It's a good city. It's a good place to be. We've just got to really advertise and outreach more. Colleges, high schools, we've kind of got to start young and just really push the benefits of these jobs. Because I know I've been in public service my whole life, and I love it. So I feel like I can explain that and do that for children, trying to get them to reach out.
Councilmember McConnell, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McNeil, for joining us this evening and for your interest in serving on the Civil Service Commission. My question for you is a two-parter. First is, could you describe the current involvement of the Civil Service Commission in the hiring and backgrounding process? And the second part is, what, if anything, would you like to see changed in that process?
So, the current process right now, I know that the Civil Service Commission sets the requirements, the qualifications for each position, and they're involved in the interviewing and hiring process to pick out candidates. The thing I would change in that process, and I've been through this process before when I was a younger man and tried to join the fire department, there was no transparency. So you went through the process and you may have gotten a job, you may not have gotten a job, and you really didn't know how you did or what you could do better. So when it was over, it was just like, the fire department jobs are thousands of people applying for 25 to 50 positions. And when it's all said and done, if you didn't get one of them, you got your name and your number on the list, and you have no idea what you could do better, how you can improve, what the city's looking for. So I think there should be more transparency in the process about what we want as a city, so people understand what they can do to make themselves better candidates in the future.
Great, thank you so much for that answer.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Moreo, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. McNeil, for your time today. My question is, can you tell me about a time where your ethics were challenged and how you worked through that?
Yeah, so when I was overseas, I was working in Afghanistan doing remote medic work maybe 5 years ago. Our project manager was really, and keep in mind, just to paint a picture, is that he was from a different country. We're in Afghanistan. Everything's a little bit different. It's not like it is here. And I think he was from Eastern Europe country, something like that. No, he was from Canada. He was from Canada. But he was very, he was vulgar, different things like that. He was sexist. He had problems with the female members of our staff. He was very difficult, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And there's nobody to turn to because he's a project manager. And I had staff reach out to me like, we don't know what to do. We all kind of feel stuck. And we kind of organized, we went to the managers that were on our base on Kandahar, and we didn't get a lot of results. We reached out to our managers in Seattle at the time. And we were able to deal with it, and we were able to kind of we had a conversation with him, and then it escalated after that, and he was really kind of retaliating. And ultimately, we went through the proper channels, and he tried to get different people on his side, including myself, and it's just like, no, man, this isn't right. Like, what you're doing and how you're doing this is not right. You've turned this already hostile environment to much more hostile. We're in a war zone, and we have to wake up every morning, and we have to deal with you and everything you're doing. Ultimately, what got him removed is he had an argument with a soldier, and when it happened, he came to us and he said he wanted us to hide it. Like, hey, when you say what happened here, don't say everything that happened. Keep some of this down, and we didn't. We stood, and he offered us different benefits, but it was just like, look, no, we're not doing that. This is what happened, and you have to deal with the outcome. So we did that. Ultimately, he got sent home, and we got a new project manager, but sometimes you just have to stand on your own moral code and do the right thing.
Councilmember Hiltz?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for applying. You had mentioned that in your opening statement why you wanted to apply, but my question is, what do you hope to accomplish during your term?
I would hope to accomplish restoring trust and faith back in our public service agencies. I think we have to hold our fire department and our police department to a very high standard, and what I would like to accomplish is reaching that. We're under a lot of scrutiny right now as a city. I mean, really nationwide, they're looking at us saying, what's going on here? There's a lot of rules and laws and things being changed based off situations that have happened in our city. And what I would like to see is us to be more of a shining example than what's been happening lately. So if I could do anything, it'll be to improve the trust in our agency. And I know that we're short-staffed, and I would hope that we can get back up to normal functioning levels across the board.
Thank you.
Mr. McNeil, please provide any additional comments you would like to make. You will have 2 minutes. You are now recognized for 2 minutes.
For me?
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the first part of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are recognized for 2 minutes for any additional comments, closing remarks.
All right, perfect. Sorry about that. I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity. I love the city of Aurora. I grew up here. I've been a servant my whole life. I look forward to trying to continue to serve in different ways. I've been in EMS, it feels like my entire life. I've been in EMS and I've been serving. I'm currently in school. I'm switching over into the nursing side of things I like to help people. That's what I do. I've been doing it my whole life. I just feel like we can do better, and I want to be a part of the change to help us do that. I want to support our agencies. I want to get us the best personnel so we can hold ourselves to the highest standard so the people in this city can thrive. Yeah, that's pretty much it, and that's me.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Matthew Snyder.
We are getting Matthew on the meeting now. Just be 1 moment, please.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Matthew Snyder, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for applying for the Civil Service Commission. Please introduce yourself and give a 2-minute overview, up to 2 minutes, of your background and why you're interested in this position.
Very well. Mayor Kaufman, Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, City Council members, thank you for the opportunity to interview for the open position on the Civil Service Commission and for your consideration. Because by nature, I'm a person who likes to help others, I always look for opportunities to serve where my knowledge, experience, and skills can be of use. I'm the guy who always raises his hand to volunteer, and my application to serve on this commission should only be seen as an offer to serve my city. 3 years ago, I concluded a 5-year membership on the board of directors of the Beacon Point Metropolitan District. I think I contributed significantly to that district. And because I went off that board, I have time available. I've spent most of the time for the last 4 years working extensively at the law firm, but I'm looking for another opportunity to serve. In the ensuing 3 years, I've also continued to serve the Cherry Creek School District as a volunteer member of the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee, on which I am now in my 7th year of service. Been involved in the process of designing multiple successful bond and mill levy campaigns and been involved in building several schools in the district. In 2016, I ran for Colorado State Representative from House District 56 as the Democratic Party nominee. I may have run as a Democrat, but my personal vision in politics are much more populist, centrist, and bipartisan. I've spent years on the other side of the aisle when I lived in Texas, and so I consider myself pretty much centrist as far as my politics is concerned. I'm a Democrat because of issues related to social policy. I attended Bright Divinity School at Texas Christian University, and I'm an ordained United Methodist minister. I have pastored 2 churches in the United Methodist Church, one in Texas and one in Colorado.
Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt. You have a few more seconds to wrap up your first comments.
I'm about to do it. A long time ago in New York City, where I was born and raised, I served on the New York City Auxiliary Police Force and contemplated a career as a police officer. I think that gives me a fairer understanding of the issues that might raise themselves as I serve on the Civil Service Commission.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Schneider, for applying for the Civil Service Commission. Very important commission. My question is, when commissioners conduct disciplinary hearings, do you think that they should consider public opinion when making their decisions? And what information would you consider?
Well, I don't think public opinion is more important than facts about an issue related to discipline. It's very hard. I understand the environment we live in, and it's very hard to divorce yourself from that entirely when thinking about an issue that comes before the commission. But I'd like to think that I've built a reputation of being extremely logical and being fact-based. I work for a law firm. We live in the world of facts only, that which you can prove. And, I pride myself on not being swayed one way or the other by other people's opinions. I have an independent mind. I have excellent reasoning skills. I'm well educated, and I'm also well versed in, politics and the events of the day. But I don't think that would ever come into play in the decision that I would make.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Councilmember Burgess, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight and for your application. We appreciate it.
Sure.
As you know, our civil service commissioner candidates will be screened before we vote on them. Is there anything that you have done in the past or currently involved in that might make your appointment questionable either to us or the media?
I don't think so. I mean, I got a copy of the same background investigation that you folks should have received today. At least I got it today, and there's nothing back there. I mean, I'm Mr. Boring. Boring is good. I ran. Like I said, for House District 56, I was endorsed by the Aurora Sentinel. They thought I would have made a really good representative. I started to run for Cherry Creek School District Board several years ago in the seat that in District Director D. But I withdrew simply because the responsibilities I have at the law firm just wouldn't allow for that. I'm winding down my career now and probably going to retire in the end of March. And so, I have plenty of time. But no, there's nothing back there. I'm really quite boring. I work, go to school, go to church, that's about it.
Okay. I do have a second part of my question.
Yes, ma'am.
So with everything that you've told us, so do you feel like you can be completely objective in hearings and in disciplinary appeals?
Yes, absolutely. I don't approach anything, if there was something that I thought I could not be objective about, I would tell the chair, and, I would basically, withdraw from that decision. But no, I don't think there's anything that can come up that I would be jaundiced about.
Thank you so much, Mr. Snyder.
Sure.
Councilmember Coombs, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Snyder, for taking the time to join us this evening.
Sure.
My question is about the Civil Service Commission itself. As you probably know, through our investigations and the other investigations that the city has commissioned and other investigations into our police and fire departments, the Civil Service Commission has come under heavy scrutiny.
Sure.
And so my question is, how will you adapt to any changes that may result from that scrutiny?
Well, it depends on what the scrutiny is. I mean, I've perused the rules regarding, the 95 pages worth of rules for the commission. And it's the chair, according to the rules, the chair is the person who speaks on behalf of the commission. So it's not like I'm going to be making any statements to the public, about anything. My life can withstand scrutiny. I think my work can withstand scrutiny. So if they wanted to somehow, cast aspersions on me, I don't think you're going to find much. So you know, I don't know. I know what happened with the prior appointment. It wasn't pretty. You know, like I said, I'm Mr. Boring, and boring's pretty good. So I don't know what can, I don't know if you could give me some more specifics about the question, possibly answer that. But since I won't be talking on behalf, talking on behalf of the commission, the chair does. You know, I really need some more details to be able to answer this better for you.
Sure. So if there were changes to the procedures, for example, for processing backgrounds or for looking at disciplinary cases, would you be willing and open to abiding by those changed processes?
Of course. The rules have been developed over many, many years. I mean, the commission's been around for a long, long time. I think 1967. So that body, 95 pages, body of rules has been around for a very long time, been amended. I think I counted 25 times. So, and each commission amended them. So if there are amendments and I participate in that amendment process, whether or not it goes in favor of my vote or not. And I think all but two of the amendments, if I remember reading the history correct, all but two of those amendments were decided unanimously. And there was only two that was a 4-1 vote. But I didn't go into what that is. So I think I would have no problem, especially if I were to participate in the rulemaking. I don't have any problem abiding by that.
Councilmember Gardner, you're now recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, Mr. Snyder. Thank you for being here tonight and for your application. What unique skill set or strengths might you bring to the commission that other candidates may not?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. What's a unique skill set or strengths you might have and that you bring to the commission that other candidates might not?
Well, I don't know. I don't know who the other candidates are and what they might bring. I assume they're equally qualified or we wouldn't be visiting with you all tonight. But I like to think that I have a really high level of ethics. I mean, I went to seminary, got ordained. The backbone of my life has been, working for other people. And I think I have a super highly developed set of, a super highly developed ethical philosophy that guides all of my decision making, for my life, and whether it's business or personal. I like to think I'm very well educated. I'm very well read. Like to think I have excellent reasoning skills. I like to think I have a heart for people. And I try to give people the benefit of the doubt where possible. But trust is something that has to be earned. You just don't give that away. And like to think I, make decisions rationally, carefully, with due deliberation. These are the things that I think are most important. I ran a business for over 35 years with lots of employees, and never in all those years did I have a problem with, because I didn't reason something out. So those are the essential skills that I bring to this. I have great business acumen, that type of thing. So but I don't know what that has to, would bear on the commission. But, I bring my whole self to this, but those particular things I just talked about, I think are most important.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Councilmember Gruber, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Snyder.
Sure.
Can you describe any experience you have in mediation process between management and a labor organization?
Sure. That one I got. A long time ago, I was the benefits manager, chief plan administrator, and fiduciary for the LTV Corporation, which was a aerospace and defense contractor down in Dallas before they went bankrupt and closed. So, and as the benefits manager, I was responsible for labor relations with the rank and file, who were not obviously, hourly employees, and we had lots and lots of them. So my job was partially to negotiate benefits and adjustments to benefits that have been contractually negotiated. It was not easy, but there was a particularly difficult one when I first came on board. Now, mind you, there were over 55,000 active and retired participants in our benefit plans. So that's, who was involved in this. So one of the union heads refused to negotiate with the executive vice president of the company because he would not, at least it was felt he would not negotiate in good faith. Anyway, when I came on board, I asked for permission to go out and visit with him. And my boss gave me permission to do that. And I had a contract before the afternoon was over. And I like to think part of that is because I grew up in a union family and I understand how unions work. I understand how union members think. I understand what union members want and need and deserve. And I also understand, used to fight with my grandfather all the time. How could you end up in management? But anyway, so that's an example of, I hope that's a good enough answer in 3 minutes or less, but I was able to diffuse a very tense situation by being able to meet in an otherwise implacable and tractable, argument with common sense and good faith, and resolved the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Hilton, now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for being here and for applying. My question is, you were already talked in your intro about why it is that you applied. So my question is, what do you hope to accomplish on your term or during your term?
I hope to make things easier for all the rest of you. I know how important this commission is, and I know that it is a highly visible one that, the public's eye is always looking at, especially in the current environment. And I hope to be able to, be recognized as a person who can make a good contribution towards, restoring good faith, especially in the police department and the fire department, and in the city in general. If I can do a good job with the other members of the commission, and that causes you less headaches, and it makes the city safer and, more peaceful, I think I will have accomplished a lot.
Councilmember Lawson, you're now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Snyder, for being here and applying for the commission. My question to you is, what reforms do you think the commission should consider within the current civil service application process that could improve the deficit of diversity in our police and fire academies and department?
Well, I don't have a full background yet on what the current selection process is. So it would be a bit premature for me to make recommendations for changes to a system that I don't know the ins and outs about yet. But I think that being said, there isn't enough diversity on the police force, and, again, in the current political climate, I think that's a sensible thing to do. And I also think that if there was more diversity in the civil service ranks, I think that the citizens of Aurora would think better of both the police department, the fire department, and the city in general. So any changes that I might suggest or want to recommend after I get into the commission and kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it would be, with an eye towards the equity and fairness that I think needs to permeate every aspect of life. But I have to get that background first. I have to look at and understand what the process is, how the process has evolved. But I know just from what I've read, just from what I've heard, there are changes for the better that can be made. And I'd certainly be willing to look at anything that would do that.
Thank you. Councilmember McConnell, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Mr. Snyder, for joining us this evening and for your interest in serving on the Civil Service Commission.
Sure.
My question for you is a two-parter. So the first part is, could you describe the current involvement of the Civil Service Commission in the hiring and backgrounding process? And then the second part is, what, if anything, would you like to see changed in that process?
Okay, I kind of had a little drop out there on the first part. Could you state that again, please?
Sure, sorry about that. So it's a two-parter. First part, could you describe the current involvement of the Civil Service Commission in the hiring and backgrounding process? And then the second part is, what, if anything, would you like to see changed in that process?
Well, again, this is, I don't have a complete understanding yet of the full process. But it's, if it works the same way as it does on the police department, city of New York, basically there are two types of candidates that come to before the Civil Service Commission. There were those that were what we used to call original entry, and then there are those who we used to call lateral transfers from other departments. And basically the process was a little less stringent on lateral transfers, because the assumption was that, if you're working somewhere else on another department, be it fire or police, that the background checks have already been done. So you can kind of streamline that application. It's the original entry candidates that are the ones that you really need to examine, whether they be midlife career changers or, first career applicants. Again, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I know, policing is not for everybody. It's just not. And so it's really important to screen out the people who, whether personally or dispositionally, you have questions about. It's too important a position to be careless about that. So I would say, whatever the process is, and I will learn about it as I get on the commission, those are the things I'm looking for. Is this person who's looking at coming into police work or firefighting work, are they dispositionally and personally disposed to this type of work? Lateral transfers, that's pretty routine as long as the person has not been disqualified else. And go on the record saying, because this was part of my platform in 2016, is I went on record saying that if a police officer has been disqualified in another jurisdiction in Colorado, and they've had their, post license lifted, they shouldn't be serving in the city of Aurora. So.
A few more seconds.
Yep, no. Well, that's about it. I don't know if I got it all in there for you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Murillo, you are now recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Snyder, for your time and energy in applying for this position. Can you tell me about a time when your ethics were challenged and how you handled that situation?
Oh, golly. Well, as I pointed out earlier in my statements, I'm Mr. Boring. And most people know that I really cannot be bought or bribed or in any way, shape, or form influenced. I've been far too successful for that, and I've had the good fortune of having developed a very, very strong ethical philosophy, because I spent an awful lot of my young life in religious training. And so there really, in my opinion, there really hasn't been, I really haven't had a crisis of ethics, because I always seem to, I approach the situation with the totality of who I am and what I've learned and what I've evolved to be. And so I don't run into crises of ethics, because I always try to be ethical. And people know that about me. And so if they try to come to me to influence me, they stop before they even get to me, because they know they can't do it. So I wish I had a better answer for you than that, but I don't get challenged very often, because I act ethically and morally in every situation. So I try to be ethical and fair and equitable in all of my business decisions. And, that's who I am.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, for your closing remarks, please provide any additional comments you would like to make. You will now have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you. I didn't prepare any closing remarks, but I think, basically what I've summed up for you is a person who is available and ready to serve the city. I think, you've seen from my background investigation that I would not be a controversial appointment. I met the former mayor, the late Steve Hogan, when I ran for HD 56 at a political event. And, Steve took me aside and he said to me, he said, look, I don't care what letter's next to your name. He said, if you get elected, just make sure that whatever you do, you try to help the city of Aurora no matter what. Be the best city it can be, do everything you can for it. And I promised them I would. And that's really what's behind, my offer of service here, is that I think I can contribute to making Aurora a better city. I think I possess the requisite knowledge and experience and skills, good character, good decision-making, rationality. I think all those things that would go into making, a good commission member.
Mr. Stoddard, thank you very much for applying for the Civil Service Commission and for your time tonight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, council members.
The way I'd like to proceed at this time would be to potentially do up to 3 rounds. I know hopefully it won't take that much, but go down the roster of council members, Mayor Pro Tem and myself, and go until one of these 3 candidates has 6 votes. And in the first round, if no candidate has 6 votes, drop the lowest ranking candidate off the list, and then proceed to the next round. Is there any objection to doing that? Seeing none, that's how.
Mayor, I actually have a question.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. I thought that we typically handle this during the next regular meeting as opposed to in study session.
Katie?
Yes, that's correct. We'll do
That's correct.
the official appointment and voting of
Okay.
member on November 22nd.
I stand corrected. The time is now 6:48. We will stand in recess until 7 p.m.
Mayor, may I do a quick announcement?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It wasn't scheduled. IT got a hold of me and said that WebEx is having an issue right now. So if someone tries to join using a new device or browser, they might not be able to get back into this meeting. So I just wanted to let everybody know in case you have to log off for some reason, you might have some trouble logging back into WebEx.
Encourage everybody to stay in. Time is now, we will take a 12-minute recess. Time is now 7:48. We will reconvene at 7 p.m. Time is now 7 p.m. and the study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, November 15, 2021 is back in session. There's no mayor's update, no issue update. Consent calendar, is there any objection to moving the consent calendar forward, item 4A and 4B? Seeing no objection, the consent calendar, item 4A and 4B will move forward. Item number 5A, Rockies Ford Land Management IGA, Alexandra Davis.
Yes, good evening. I am going to try to put my presentation back. I was walking through it during the break, so I have to figure out where I am. Let's see. There, and now go to share my screen. I want to share. I apologize. Now you're seeing my conversation, my preparation. I apologize. Katie, can you direct me to sharing appropriately?
Yes, on your bottom middle, it should say share of WebEx. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you click on it, you should be able to share just your presentation.
I have share my screen, share application.
Share your application.
Okay. Ah, got it. Okay. From the beginning. Okay. Thank you. Now, I appreciate your patience. And yeah, okay. Thank you. Good evening. For the record, my name is Alexandra Davis. I am the Deputy Director for Water Resources with the Aurora Water Department. And I'm here tonight to present upon a proposed agreement with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This agreement is designed to allow them to help us manage prairie dogs on our Rocky Ford lands. As you know, we have an office and dedicated staff in Rocky Ford. Rocky Ford is in Otero County, way down in the southeast area of the state, and it is a rural county where the economic driver is agriculture. While that team in the office works on numerous projects, including water supply projects, water storage projects, accounting, operations, all of these things related to our water supply from both the Colorado River and the Arkansas River, there are two very important reasons why we even have an office there in Rocky Ford. And one of those reasons is to manage about 4,000 acres, the land that Aurora acquired in the 80s and 90s, and to manage that land pursuant to the water court decrees that allow Aurora to access over 14,000 acre feet of water annually. The second reason is to maintain relationships in that area of Colorado due to the importance of this area to our water supply. So when Aurora first started buying water in the Rocky Ford area, we were not a welcome participant in the water market, and we were not viewed as a good neighbor. And as all of you know, relationships are critical in the water world. And the Rocky Ford office has been extremely successful in developing positive relationships for the city there. The agreement with the USDA is to manage prairie dogs on our property and to eradicate some of the colonies while creating an area where at least one of them can thrive. Do we have, can you see my pointer on the map?
Yes.
So we have this is the Arkansas River running along the north edge. The blue and black boundaries show the farmland that Aurora purchased and has spent the last 20 years revegetating. This area to the south of our land is all private farmland here. The cross-hatched area are the areas where the prairie dog colonies exist. And you can see, and this circle should be over to the right. It should be around this area. So the circled area is where we want to let prairie dogs continue to thrive and to live. And you can see that that area is adjacent to the land between our land and the river, which is managed by Parks and Wildlife as a wildlife area, a state wildlife area. So that's a perfect place for prairie dogs to be. The bigger colonies down here to the south are adjacent to this private land where the prairie dogs have already started to migrate onto that private land and are not only creating a lot of damage to our grasses here, but significant damage to the private land as well. So we need to take these actions because if we don't, the consequences could be severe. The water court decrees require us to maintain the land and native grasses, and those grasses are being damaged by the prairie dogs. And if we don't comply with the water court decree, we could lose access to the water until we are back into compliance. The city has invested millions of dollars into our revegetation program. And in fact, the team down there has done such a good job that our revegetation is held up as the gold standard by which other court decrees are, they want those terms and conditions in other court decrees, and other entities who are revegetating land are being asked to meet what we've done, what the city has done on that land. County rules and regulations require control. And our neighboring farmers have already expressed significant concern and upset because of the damage that's going on right now. So part of our plan is to create an area where prairie dogs can continue to thrive. And in this regard, this will be a step up because previously the land was all in private farming and prairie dogs were not welcome on any of the lands that we now own. But we will have an area where Wildlife Services will be working with Parks and Wildlife, and we will be working with Parks and Wildlife to manage those prairie dogs in a sustainable population. When we brought this to water policy, several council members had asked for more information on what non-lethal methods we had already used to try to control the prairie dogs on the land. Several years ago, we erected a number of raptor perches in order to increase natural predation. And we also continue to try planting trees and shrubs to create boundaries. Prairie dogs like really long sight lines so that they can see predators, and natural boundaries that are very thick and opaque will ostensibly keep them in place and keep them from moving. Our methods were not as effective as we had hoped, and so we need to change our focus. We also looked at different contractors to do this work, and we chose the USDA because along with prioritizing the land and managing the colonies for the least cost, they are agreed to collaborate with Parks and Wildlife to protect other species and to reduce any negative impacts as much as possible, as well as to reduce negative impacts to the soil and to preserve existing vegetation. And they will also help us to keep prairie dogs in that area of our land that we think prairie dogs would be good for. In our future management, we will be using several methods to manage the remaining prairie dogs, hopefully very sustainably, some of which were discussed in the Habitat Harmony Handbook. Thank you, Councilwoman Murillo, for that handbook. These methods, we hope, will help us maintain a good balance between a thriving colony of prairie dogs and really healthy native grassland that is in compliance with our water court decrees. So hopefully that will allow this border between the two lands. That's just an example of the type of fencing that you might see out there in the future when you go out to visit. And that's the end of my presentation so far. Are there any questions that I can answer?
One quick question, and that is, are prairie dogs an invasive species or are they native to the area?
Prairie dogs are native. They're native to the plains. They're actually a keystone species, so they're quite important species. They are also a species that is in regular conflict with humans, particularly farmers, any developments. So this is a difficult project to do because prairie dogs are very important. And they also are, the good news is that they breed quickly and rapidly, so they are not endangered. The black-tailed prairie dogs, which we have out there, are not an endangered species. They're not a threatened species. However, there is a conflict with our goals and our needs for the land and too many of the prairie dogs out in that area.
Further questions? Is there any objection to moving 5A forward?
I have a question.
Oh, Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you, Mayor. Alex, thanks so much for your presentation and for your presentation earlier at Policy Committee. Was just hoping you could talk a little bit about anything that's been done since that last conversation. You kind of went into what's been done in years past, but I guess I recall the conversation, us looking to explore what we could do in the meantime. If you're able to elaborate on those efforts.
So we looked at the handbook that you provided us, which is very helpful, and some of those methods we had already been looking at. I reached out to a couple of the folks who were responsible for that handbook to get more information on what methods were available and how they had been used. And unfortunately, the people that I talked to or that I communicated with by email, well, they were listed as they appeared to be mainly involved. They weren't mainly involved in the project. It was a little odd and a little confusing, but I did reach out to a couple. And so since that time, we haven't done anything different than what we did before because we have a significant problem with the prairie dogs right now. So we have to take some action very soon in order to meet county regulations, deal with our neighbors who are quite upset. One of the things that we're hoping to do is look perhaps into relocation possibilities. We haven't found any. I don't know if anyone else, would be very open to suggestions of places where they could be relocated to. It's very difficult to find a relocation possibility. But we continue to try to think about, well, how can we do this differently in the time frame that we have? And so the options for the immediate future are fairly limited, but for the longer future, maybe there are more options going forward.
Mayor, I have another question.
Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that. I think the other kind of thread of questions was getting a greater sense of what being in compliance with the water courts looks like, right? So I guess there wasn't like a finite timeline that I was aware of in our prior conversation, and I'm trying to gauge the flexibility from this water court mandate. If have we reached out to them? Have we been able to communicate and kind of express our circumstance, our desire to manage this population potentially non-lethally? Have we had any of those conversations since the policy committee?
So, and I apologize for not walking away from policy committee with that particular directive. So I must have either my notes were not complete but I didn't, and we could have been more prepared to talk about the water court requirements. The decree has a retained jurisdiction period, and that retained jurisdiction period requires us to have panels of vegetation experts who come out and they assess the vegetation based on the thickness of the grasses, the health of the grasses, and they determine what state the land is in and decide when it's rated, I think, from a 1 to a 7. we had the panel out there and 2 years ago. So don't hold me strictly to the facts here because I'm trying to remember exactly. We just had the panel out there relatively recently, and most of the areas, except for these areas where the prairie dogs were in very good shape. As I recall the terms of the decree, if we don't maintain the levels of those vegetated grasses, then our retained jurisdiction continues. And as long as our retained jurisdiction continues, the court has the ability, and any of the opposers have the ability to come back in and reopen that decree and acquire new terms and conditions or ask the court to enforce the terms and conditions that exist. I don't want to say too much more because I haven't looked at that decree recently, but I would be happy to look at that decree and get you more specific information about the terms and conditions and the deadlines. It's kind of an ongoing, it's not like we have by this day you shall X, it's you shall be doing this for 20 years, and then when retained jurisdiction ends, then you are freed from the requirements of this decree.
A follow-up, Mayor.
Please proceed.
That would be information that I would be interested in understanding more, just that flexibility. Would it suffice if we were making significant efforts, to what degree would we be in compliance with that? Because we know things don't happen overnight. They take time. So is there a threshold of compliance that wouldn't put us in jeopardy with not being in compliance with that directive from the water courts? That would be helpful information for me.
Further, a response by staff or?
Well, I was just curious in understanding that because am I correct in assuming, Councilwoman Murillo, that where you're going is perhaps is there a different place that we can balance? Is there a way that we can allow more prairie dogs to be managed or eradicated? Is that what you're kind of thinking or what exactly are you heading for there?
Yeah, so what I expressed in prior conversation was my just kind of moral objection to the lethal extermination of the prairie dogs. So you're correct. My line of questioning is trying to avoid that. I understand we're between a rock and a hard place, and I understand that staff is very empathetic to kind of that situation, and that you all have been trying to work around or explore other options, and that would be my intent, and I guess just to clarify that a little bit more.
I'm very happy to do that and to try to continue to find non-lethal options, and would strongly recommend that we continue to look for those non-lethal options while we move forward with some control due to our neighbors in particular, who are very upset with the impacts to their land. And I would hate to see that spill over into more damaging relationships. But as I expressed earlier, I'm deeply empathetic to your position, and I agree, non-lethal methods would be great and certainly our first priority if we could get there.
Mayor?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, so I guess as a further follow-up on that same line of questioning, are there any non-lethal ways that we can kind of take shorter term action that helps to address the concerns of the neighbors? Because I understand there's kind of the legal issues, and then there's also the relationships that we have that are really important in that area. So is there a way to kind of manage this population non-lethally that stops the immediate damage to the neighbor's land as we're continuing to pursue these more long-term options?
Given the numbers in those larger colonies, I think the only alternative would be relocation. And relocation is is difficult as well on those animals, just so that people know the relocation process is not very pretty. Though most of them survive, they don't all survive. But in the interim, there isn't any non-lethal method at the moment that we would have an option to do to prevent those prairie dogs from moving at the moment towards those farms. They already are. I think the Rocky Ford office gets several calls a week complaining about the prairie dogs. And, frankly, it's been because we've been pursuing ways to not have to go out and just kill the prairie dogs that have allowed a number of the colonies to get as big as they are and sort of pushed us to this point where we felt like we had to take this more significant and unpleasant action.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Hiltz.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I know this is probably not easy for you to also propose. I just have, I'm very sick, so I'm just gonna get straight to the point. I have a lot of heartburn generally right now, but also a lot of heartburn around taking an affirmative vote to kill animals generally. I mean, because that's at the end of the day, that's what we're being asked to do, to take an affirmative vote to kill animals. And I just, I think Councilmember Murillo had some good points around, what are those other options? And I understand your points about how exploring those options are what got us here, but I don't know that I can do that, regardless of what the, benefits are in terms of the larger, just in my gut, I don't know that I can just take a vote to say, yeah, go gas them. Or however it's done, I know it's not pretty, and worse than relocation, I'm sure. But I remember this conversation a couple years ago with a development, and it was quite grisly how it's done.
Further comments, questions?
Presents?
Councilmember Burzins.
Thank you. Alex, were you part of the move of prairie dogs to the east toward the farmers, toward the east? And maybe that was Parks and Rec, I don't know. But we did that thinking that we were doing a wonderful thing by just moving the prairie dogs. And then soon enough, the farmers rebelled. We were getting calls from the county commissioners, multiple county commissioners, and they were destroying crops and hurting the animals. So, I don't like to kill anything either, but I think at some point we have to prioritize, food and water and, what do we want most? I mean, that's kind of the circle of life. I know most people are afraid of prairie dogs. I would not go walking in a field or on a farm that was loaded with them. And you did say that they mate like every day, or they procreate quickly or whatever. So I don't think we would ever extinguish a whole colony, but hopefully, we could come up with a plan to save the water and the people around there that are having an issue with them. Unfortunately, that's just kind of an adult decision that we have to make, and it's not always pretty. So I just wanted to throw
Thank
that
you. Alexandra, you mentioned predators. How effective are predators in the area, and are there, I think you mentioned that as one of the options.
Well, that's why we thought in trying to find a balance here, because we get it. We get everyone's, the both sides of this equation, and we don't like to kill these creatures anymore. They're amazing creatures. So we felt that balancing the existing prairie dog colonies by eradicating those that are causing significant crop damage and causing significant damage to our grasses, while allowing the ones near the wildlife refuge to thrive, which is also a corridor for coyotes. We have for raptors going through there, so there are natural predators going through that corridor. And we have kicked around the idea of we have not yet approached Parks and Wildlife, but we've been thinking about, is there a possibility here of working with them on black-footed ferrets and in those colony areas? So there's some options going forward, but all of them require balancing the number of prairie dogs that are there. And I could understand not wanting to affirmatively vote to kill anything. I totally get it. And I think in this situation, it's a very hard choice to make, but it's one that we wouldn't have brought to you if we didn't feel like we had to make this choice.
Further questions, comments? Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you. Alex, I guess some of the other alternatives that we've considered, are these kind of similar to what we did over at Plains Conservation after we started getting, a lot of complaints from the neighbors out there about prairie dogs coming in? Like, are there other species that we might be able to introduce that aren't even necessarily predatory, but would tamp down on the, let's say, prolific nature of the prairie dogs?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they did over at Plains Conservation Center, so I apologize for not looking into that earlier. Christine actually suggested that I call Pat Schuyler, and I didn't get a chance to do that. But yes, our idea was bring in more predators and figure out how to have that kind of natural selection going, and it just wasn't enough.
Okay.
I can weigh in a little bit on that. So some of the approach at the Plains Conservation Center was with active grazing, bringing in goats, I think, out there. So we do have active grazing out on a lot of the properties in Rocky Ford. We have to manage the grazing carefully also in order to sustain healthy vegetation, but we do have active grazing out there as well, and the prairie dogs are still a problem.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there objection to moving 5A forward? Is there objection to moving 5A forward? Councilmember Coombs objects. Further objection to moving 5A forward?
Mayor Marcano.
Marcano. Further objection to moving 5A forward? Seeing no further objection, 5A will move forward.
I was just going to add Murillo.
Okay, Councilmember Murillo. Seeing no further objection, 5A will move forward. 5B, drainage and flood control improvements for the Cherry Creek restoration at Arapahoe Road. If I'm saying this right, Swervine Nirinda?
Yes, that's, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Yeah, it's Swervine Nirinda.
Oh, good.
And I'm the Planning Services Manager in Aurora Water, and what you have before you is an IGA for the Cherry Creek stream restoration at Arapahoe Road. And if you can see on the map there, the stream actually traverses 3 jurisdictions. That's the city. We have Southeast Metro Stormwater Authority and the Cherry Creek Water Basin Authority. Now, this corridor was studied in 2004, and some recommendations were made on stream stabilization. Some of those projects were actually implemented, but not all of them. And there's been a lot of development in this area. So instead of just picking up the old recommendations, what the district and us are recommending is a restudy of this area, update the study with the work that we've already done before, and then figure out ways of mitigating this stream erosion that's currently going on. So if we go to the next slide. So the cost for this initial phase of the study, which will be a design, you can see the breakdown of costs there. Aurora Water and the district will both put in 100,000 each, and then Semswa and the water basin, Semswa 20,000 and 25 from the Water Basin Authority, and obviously there's a gradation in cost. The difference is really based on where the erosion is actually occurring. Most of the erosion is actually occurring in the city of Aurora. So after the design is complete, we will come back with an amendment for construction of the recommended projects. So do you have any questions for me?
Questions to staff? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. Oh, Councilmember Gruber.
So I just had one. Do we have any water rights on this area? Are we drawing any water from Cherry Creek?
That I wouldn't know. I'd have to. I can get back with you. Let me confer with Alex and see if we
okay.
do.
Maybe just. I don't need it right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor.
Councilmember Coos.
Yeah, just with Marshall being there, I saw that you had popped on not so much about water rights, but water infrastructure that we have in the area that is impacted by this project and related projects.
Yeah, and I can probably let Swerveen answer the infrastructure question. I was going to help out with the water rights question, but we can follow up on water rights later. We really don't have any water rights, surface water rights associated with Cherry Creek. There is groundwater nearby that's indirectly connected.
Thank you.
As for infrastructure, I mean, this is the creek itself. So, Marshall, I'm not so sure that we actually have any infrastructure in there, apart from any flood mitigation infrastructure that would actually put in the creek for channel stabilization.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving 5B forward? Seeing no objection, 5B will move forward. 5C, Larson Farms and Feeding LLC, a farming and grazing lease with water use agreement. Don Jewell.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and esteemed members of the council. My name is Hector Reynoso, and I'm the Rural Property Services Division Manager in the Public Works Department. Don, I see you've turned your camera on. I don't want to take your thunder. Please introduce yourself.
I was just going to thank the mayor and council and let you know that Hector Reynoso will be presenting tonight.
Please proceed. Okay.
Sure. So as we've heard, the city of Aurora owns property throughout the entire state. The subject property for item 5C is actually located in Weld County and contains approximately 116 acres of land. In 2020, city staff solicited a request for proposals to lease up to 116 acres of land and use the associated water rights for this property. The city received 2 proposals, as highlighted in your backup, one from John Larson and one from Dale Dilka, who's are local farmers. City staff, the Aurora Water Public Works Departments comprised a selection committee that ranked each bid based on the evaluation criteria. So based on the evaluation criteria, the proposal from John Larson, who is doing business as Larson Farms and Feeding LLC, was ranked the highest. City staff recommends entering into a grazing and agricultural lease for an initial 10-year term with an option to extend for 5 additional years, subject to city approval. Rents will total approximately $11,600 per year. So the question for council is, does council moving the resolution for the farming and grazing lease with water use agreement on city-owned land in Weld County forward to regular session for consideration of approval?
Are there any questions of staff? Are there any comments, discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving 5C forward? Seeing none, 5C will move forward. Item number 5D, Ford Farms LLC, farm grazing and property lease with water use agreement. Don Jewell again.
Again, thank you, and Hector will be presenting.
Okay.
This time I waited, Don. Thanks for that introduction. Honorable Mayor and esteemed members of the council, Hector Reynoso here again. As we've heard multiple times, the city does own property throughout the entire state, and the subject property for item 5D is actually located mostly in Washington County, but a small portion of it does stretch into Logan County. This property contains approximately 1,199 acres of land, for which the city solicited a request for proposals to lease up to 1,199 acres of land and the associated water rights in 2020. The city received 4 proposals for this RFP, as highlighted in your backup. J.R. Ford, Justin Curtis, Billy Quaint, and Marty and Jenny Pose all submitted proposals. City staff from the Aurora Water and Public Works Departments comprised a selection committee that ranked each bid based on the evaluation criteria. And based on that criteria, the proposal from J.R. Ford, doing business as Ford Farms LLC, was ranked the highest. So city staff recommends entering into a grazing and agricultural lease for an initial 10-year term with an option to extend for 5 additional years, subject to city approval. Minimum rent will equal $48,975 per year, with the potential to earn up to an additional $24,600 per year, dependent on the number of cattle that the proposed lessee brings onto the site. Rent reconciliations will be made on an annual basis. So the question for council is, does council support moving the resolution for the farming and grazing lease with water use agreement on city-owned land in Washington and Logan counties forward to regular council session for consideration of approval?
Are there any questions of staff? Any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving 5D forward? Seeing no objection, 5D will move forward. Item number 6A, 2021 Fall Supplemental. Mike Franks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm here to talk about the 2021 Fall Supplemental. It's staff's first opportunity to make adjustments to the budget. Within this supplemental, we have about $113 million of net appropriations. That's offset by about $47 million in revenue. Of these totals, 3 of the adjustments make up the vast majority. There are 3 that council are familiar with. $30.8 million for the general funds to capital projects for the I-70 Piccadilly interchange projects, $12 million for the ERP system, and $19.8 million for the early payments of water debt. So that makes up the vast majority. I'm happy to take any questions on additional details.
Questions of staff? Discussion? Is there any objection to moving 6A forward? Seeing no objection, 6A will move forward. Item number 6B, council review of staff's recommendation for allocating American Rescue Plan funding. You know what, this is, why don't we take the time is now 7:38. Why don't we take a break until 7:50 and we will reconvene at 7:50. This will be a fairly involved section. It's our last agenda item of the evening. With that, council stands in recess. Time is now 7:50 p.m. and the study session for the Aurora City Council meeting of November 15th is called back into order. Item number 6B, council review of staff's recommendations for allocating American Rescue Plan funding. Mike Franks.
Can I have access to? Sure. All right, great. Can everybody see my slides? Give a review, provide some history of the rescue plan. Council has seen that before. We're also going to have Carice Canales from Housing Community Services talk about the community engagement component a little bit more, give some more detailed analysis of exactly where folks came from, get into some of the quick wins that council specifically requested, as well as some of the long-term thoughts in terms of how to allocate the funding. And then Jessica Prosser, the Housing Community Services Director, will talk a little bit about the engagement process related to some nonprofit funding. So just for context and a reminder, the law was signed on March 11, 2021, a significant amount of funding, some of which was directly given to localities. The city of Aurora received or will receive $65.4 million total. We've already received our first payment and we'll receive our second here in May of 2022. There are a variety of factors that we've talked about considering. The idea that we should really focus on one-time projects or short-term initiatives. The reality is these funds are only one-time in nature, so committing ourselves to ongoing obligations is just going to tax the operating budget. It does provide an opportunity to develop regional partnerships. That's something we continue to identify. There are a lot of opportunities within the region to kind of build those transformational projects. We've also talked about the fact that we need to consider the impact of federal legislation. This is something that continues to be an impact. We recently had the infrastructure bill approved. So as we dig into that and have a better understanding of what might be funded there, obviously we don't want to duplicate funding efforts. With that, I'll turn it over to Carice to talk a little bit about the survey piece.
Thank you, Michael, and good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I just want to give you a quick highlight from our community engagement process. And as a reminder, when we presented to you October 4th, we were only partway through the engagement, so I wanted to show you some of those final priorities from our community. And we were out there for about 6 weeks in August through October. We were able to put out a survey on Engage Aurora, as well as post idea boards that allowed for more open-ended engagement. Through that process, we heard from about 1,000 people on the survey, and that was both on Engage Aurora and the paper surveys that were translated and distributed throughout our community. We had about 200 people contribute to those idea boards with more open-ended comments about what were their priorities for recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, and they submitted over 500 ideas. And so during this engagement process, we really were trying to get a good cross-section of our community to hear a bit more on the feedback and what their priorities were. And so you can see from this graph, we had pretty even representation throughout the 6 wards of our city. And I will note that some of the survey respondents did not know their ward. So, that's a snapshot, but we're still seeing pretty even distribution across the city. And you can go to the next slide. Now, when we went out to the community with this survey, we asked people to rank different items within our 3 funding categories of community assistance, infrastructure, and service preservation. And so we'll start by looking at community assistance and the items that we had the community rank. And so when we're asking folks to rank from 1 being the highest priority to 5 the lowest, we see that Even at the end of our engagement efforts, it stayed about the same from when we presented to you in October, with affordable housing, family assistance, and mental health supports being our top categories in the rankings. I do want to note that in our open-ended feedback, we heard from our community that under this particular bucket, all of the items were really seen as huge priorities for our community. And so people did have a hard time with those rankings because they believe all of the items were important. And so you can see there is a good amount of variation between the two boards, and that the rankings are fairly close together. But we heard loud and clear that community assistance was important because it would directly get funding into some high impact areas. Next slide, please. So under infrastructure, we had the same exercise to rank the different items, and you see a bit more alignment between the different wards here, with road and street maintenance, broadband infrastructure, and water system enhancements really coming out on top. And just a little bit of variation with a couple of the wards on a few items. But here you're seeing a bit stronger of correlations with the top 3 rankings. Next slide, please. Under service preservation, we saw complete alignment across the wards, which was really interesting, and a much stronger correlation for the top 3 rankings of support to our public safety and essential workers, nonprofit assistance, and restoration of lost city revenue and services. And I do want to make a small note that midway through the engagement process, we learned that the debt service repayment was not an eligible ARPA expense. That ended up not being a big priority for our community, but we still want to really focus on those top areas that were a big priority for our community. And again, seeing the alignment across the wards for this one was much stronger. Next slide. Oh. And then finally, we had the community rank the 3 different funding categories of community assistance, infrastructure, and service preservation. And here we see a good amount of alignment too across the wards, where community assistance really was a priority for a lot of folks, getting those funds out into our high impact areas. Next slide, please. In the open-ended feedback, we were able to cull through all the responses, and we heard a wide variety of comments from folks. Really, the top themes were around affordable housing, services to our homeless population, and mental health supports. But again, we heard a lot of these other themes that we do want to highlight. And throughout the engagement process, we wanted to keep these top priorities and themes really front and center for some of these funding allocation recommendation discussions, so that we could make sure to elevate the priorities of our community. Next slide. With that, I'll pass it back to Michael.
Thank you. So that highlights what the community thought. We wanted to also just kind of bring everybody up to speed in terms of what's already happened. So previous actions that council has taken, we did include $8.6 million in the 2022 budget. So we had a variety of different funding option or items there. The $5.2 million for affordable housing gap financing and housing match software, $1.7 million for safe outdoor space, and Aurora Day Resource Center renovations, almost $1 million for infrastructure requirements in the court system, $500,000 for a disparity study, and $247,000, 2 positions to assist with leveraging grant funding and grant monitoring and compliance. So we'd already taken some action within the 2022 budget. We've also gone through a process working with departments where we asked them to submit potential ARPA projects when going through the eligibility and the different options and the idea that we were going to try to get the funding out into the community. So looking through that lens, departments had an opportunity to submit projects, then compiled a cross-departmental team who reviewed the projects using established criteria. So equitable outcomes is 25%, is the project going to benefit historically underserved or marginalized groups, community? 25% evidence-based outcomes. Are they using evidence-based interventions with a track record of success? And I would note those are two items that we are actually required to report out on within the federal reporting process. So we're going to have an annual report related to ARPA. So these are the things that we'll have to be talking about within that report. 25% cost benefit. And the thing we were really honing in on here is what are the long-term costs? Again, these are one-time funds, so making sure that if we were going to include long-term recurring costs, that the benefit was going to be there. And then 25% community input based on all the work that Carice and her team did to engage the community. We wanted to make sure that was obviously factored in. So the committee provided a recommendation to management that will serve as the guide for what we're talking about tonight, and also future recommendations that we'll bring to council. So Carice hit on this a little bit, but wanted to remind everybody, these are the spending categories that we used as part of the CARES Act. We've continued to use them with ARPA. So we have the community assistance bucket, infrastructure, service preservation, and that's how we're going to, again, talk about them tonight. And what we did was really focus this first round on the quick win piece. That was the input council provided. Last time, what can we do to have an impact on the community? That was also what we heard within the surveys. So we focused on, what can we do to have a quick impact? And this is the summary of that. So in the first bucket, community assistance, it's $15 million. And this is by far the most significant allocation in the quick win piece. As Carice mentioned, the community was really focused and staff agreed on getting funding out and being able to have a real impact on the community and those that were impacted by COVID-19. So we have $3.8 million in community activities. This includes $2.5 million for a competitive nonprofit grant process. Jessica Prosser will talk more about that. Incentives to subsidize the impact of getting the vaccine for Aurora residents. So this is something that is even more important now that the vaccine is out for people age 5 to 11. So basically helping those individuals be able to get vaccinated within the community that might be having a hard time. 2 programs that will have a positive impact on the community: City Hall to Go and Community Connector programs. So City Hall to Go is would be housed within Housing Community Services and would allow staff to have all the technology infrastructure required to go out at community events, different ward meetings, and provide that virtual or hybrid work environment where people can participate either remotely or in person, as well as different potential events. The Community Connector program is hiring positions to go out, temporary positions into the community and really trying to get and engage specific groups within the community. We also have $50,000 for the virtual library expansion. Folks have continued to use the library more and more as the pandemic has gone on. So this would allow us to enhance the catalog of services that are included within the virtual library. We have $6.7 million in the housing homeless bucket. So we have the 5.2 that we included in the 2022 budget. So the $5 million for affordable housing gap financing and the $200,000 for the housing match software. We also have funding included for the safe outdoor space. Again, that was included in the 2022 budget. $1 million for cold weather sheltering options. And again, $200,000 for the Aurora Day resource renovations, which was included in the budget. And then $4.5 million for economic development. So $2 million for a restaurant assistance program. Obviously, restaurants were one of the industries hit particularly hard during the pandemic. So this would be one piece, and then a more broad small business grant rescue program of $2.5 million in funding. So again, of the about $20 million that was allocated for the quick win piece, $15 million is in the community assistance piece, with the idea of getting it out into the community. The next bucket is infrastructure. And what we focused on here are various infrastructure items with the goal being to, again, help council, the community, and staff connect and to enhance those efforts. So we have what we've called Aurora Next, but programming here is, again, going to be able to help council and the public engage and also have staff do that. So we have $240,000 for conference rooms with hybrid meeting capability, $1.5 million for laptop and hotel cube equipment to help with the process of staff going back into the office, and technology and ADA improvements for council chambers of $250,000. We also have the infrastructure component that we talked about that's primarily in the court system that will again help the court system do their job and help the residents of Aurora connect with services. The last piece of the quick wins is service preservation. So $1.7 million. We have revenue replacement. So this $100,000 would sure up some of the programs in the court surcharge program. We have lower and lower ticket revenue based on the nature of COVID-19 and other factors. So this one-time infusion would help secure that funds. We have $880,000 for essential personnel support. This would reimburse employees for the furlough days that were taken in 2021. There were several that were included in the 2021 budget. They were ultimately canceled, but 2 of them did occur, and employees were furloughed for those days. And then we have the grant management support, which we already talked about, which will allow us to help develop those regional partnerships, help us monitor and remain in compliance. And then long-term, those positions will benefit the city as we continue to have different grant opportunities. Obviously, with things like the infrastructure bill passing, there might be competitive grant processes. Having those positions in within the city are going to have a benefit. The long-term process, so that's the quick wins. We are going to remain in utilizing the 3 buckets. So we have the community assistance, infrastructure, and service preservation. And based just on the reality of the amount of funding, the fact that there continue to be a significant number of regional partnerships, staff thought it made more sense to come back and focus on one of these categories at a time in future meetings. So having additional touch points where we can talk and get more into details about how the rest of the funding would be allocated, utilizing these broad categories. So, community activities, mental health, homelessness housing, economic development, the Aurora Next effort, IT infrastructure, IT software, revenue replacement, essential personnel support, and grant management. So again, we would come back and provide more details about the remaining funding at a subsequent meeting for each of these categories. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jessica Prosser, who will lead the next couple of slides.
Great, thanks, Michael, and hi, Mayor and Council. So with that, and we're thinking about coming back and then also the process for allocating funds in the community, I don't want us to lose sight of the leveraging opportunities. And so I'll start at the bottom of the slide. Actually, we've laid out the different things that have come to mind. The first 2 are task forces that the state is working through. We've mentioned these before. The recommendations for these should be out in mid-December from following along on those, and then we'll translate into allocation processes in the beginning of 2022. We have also been meeting with the governor's office. Several of you came along on the Ridgeview tour last week, and the governor's office has put forth a proposed budget for $1 million for homeless service hubs. This would be things like the first bullet point up here related to a new homeless services campus, possibly, on the land that's existing on the campus or somewhere close by. And then $45 million is called out in that as well, specifically for Ridgeview. Both Arapahoe and Adams County both have processes they're going through for allocation of ARPA funds. Adams County has a $35 million community assistance bucket that they're putting out initially for their sort of first tranche of funding. And we've been in, close communication with Arapahoe County as well on the different sort of big transformational projects as well. I don't want us to lose sight that the city has also been allocated $4.2 million of HUD home dollars specifically for infrastructure related to homelessness. So we don't have to decide on that anytime soon, but that will need to go into one project would be the easiest for that. And then we also have the opioid funding coming. Obviously, the infrastructure bill, several other things that are coming down the line can affect this. So the recommendation from staff at this point is to sort of put a placeholder for the 2 projects up here at the top in order to have that leveraging ability, but not make a final decision on those, tonight. We're just looking for sort of guidance from council on the previous slides that Michael has put together under the quick wins. But we want to make sure that we have something set aside when these larger state opportunities come about that will be able to be well aligned for leveraging. Next slide, Michael. So for the buckets that we've just talked about in terms of community assistance, we know there's many nonprofits, service providers, businesses that are looking to the city and saying, you know, how do we get some of your ARPA money? Some of them have already, you know, made pitches to us. And so we want to make sure that that's a structured in, you know, fair and equitable process and transparent moving forward. So the idea would be that we would have an application process. We would use the ARPA eligibility to sort of frame that. The applicants would choose a category that their project would align with. I've listed some categories here below. They would submit a scope and a budget to us in kind of a simpler application. And then we would have review teams for each of these slated, review the projects, pick ones that score well, and then have an opportunity for those different entities to come back to council and make short presentations, kind of like a public hearing where they could come in and sort of pitch their ideas and their projects. The exception would be the affordable housing gap financing process. We already have a community investment process in place for that. And so that $5.2 million that was approved through the 2022 budget would move forward utilizing that process separately to really fund some shovel-ready affordable housing projects. So for nonprofit assistance, business assistance, homelessness, mental health, that would be in this part of the funding category. You can go to the next slide, Michael. So the timeline is still a little bit TBD. We want to, you know, get, have this first conversation with council about the idea of utilizing this type of process, very similar to what Adams County is using right now, very similar to what we've done for some of the previous rounds of CARES funding in different ways that we've allocated funding previously throughout COVID. So we would come back with another touch point with council in December before the application is released. At that point, we would have the exact amount of funding in each of the buckets. We would shore up the evaluation criteria, which I've listed some here that we've used for these other ARPA projects to prioritize. We've used some of these with CARES and other processes that we have. These are just kind of general categories for evaluation. And then from there, we would put out an application to the community. And like I said, get some ideas in, not make it a super cumbersome application. Once we choose projects, then we would get all the specifics and details from those different entities and ultimately have to have an agreement with each of those and structure what that, you know, funding situation looks like. So I think with that, that's all we really had to share tonight. I can turn it back over to Michael to kind of wrap it up. But I think at this point, just looking for, you know, council's buy-in on this sort of approach to the quick wins and then the process for allocating funds in the community. And I know we're all happy to take any questions.
Just the staff on the quick win part, let's do the quick wins first. Questions for staff on the quick wins?
Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, so on the improvements to the council chambers, I know part of that, of course, is being able to do hybrid meetings. But I know we were also supposed to receive a presentation on the accessibility issues or the accessibility improvements that were being made to council, or I mean, being made to the council chambers. And from the information that we received prior to the presentation that we didn't end up having, it looked like mainly the improvements that were going to be made were signage as far as the lift. And so I have some serious questions and concerns about that. The use of the lift is part of the inaccessibility of our chambers because it requires a staff member to escort someone and use a key to get down to the floor to speak if they use a mobility aid. And that's very concerning to me. I think if we're going to talk about accessibility and inclusion, that's not inclusion when someone has to take a separate entrance to get to the space that anybody else can access. So I don't know who is the right person to answer that question, but probably someone from Public Works. But whether or not it's ADA compliant and whether or not it's actually inclusive are two separate things. And I would like to discuss and address that and talk about what it would take to make it actually inclusive, which is something I've been asking city management about for 2 years.
Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. Cindy Collett, Public Works Director, and we are updating that presentation and we'll be bringing it back to you, understanding some of the concerns that you have expressed. So we'll be doing that. We've talked about maybe after the first of the year, but definitely understand your concerns, and we're planning to reach out and chat with you about them separately, if that's okay.
Sure, thank you.
Further comments, further questions on quick wins section?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. On the 15 million where it says new homeless services campus, and then the Ridgeview Academy was 1 to 2 million. Was the 1 to 2 part of the 15 or separate?
Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, two separate projects. So the new homeless services campus would be replacing the Day Resource Center and current overnight shelter of Comitas to be in a new, more, efficient, safe, trauma-informed building, either on the campus or somewhere close by. So that would be a new homeless services campus. And again, the state is doing set-aside funding for those types of campuses. They'd like to have one in Denver, probably one in Jefferson County, and then one on the east side of town. So Aurora's well aligned to leverage that funding. And then the Ridgeview Academy would be something totally separate. That would be a transitional housing campus with that workforce development and, housing placement. So one is kind of an emergency shelter and day resource center like we currently have. The other one would be transitional housing. And when asked the state, I specifically asked, how much funding are you looking for from each of the different partner jurisdictions for Ridgeview Academy, understanding the state is putting aside 45 million. They said, a couple of million would be helpful to really show our support and engage in that project. So the state's really trying to cover the rehab and then the operational piece of that facility.
Okay, so my question on the Day Resource Center. So we just renovated that several years ago. I can't remember how much we spent. I think several million. You cannot, the Day Resource Center we're using for the day primarily. Sometimes we use it for cold weather activation as well. Are we, I don't even know where this proposal is. So the other ones, you have an application process. For example, over a mental health campus would be an application process, but the new homeless service campus is not part of the application process?
So because we currently own that building, it's a city facility. I think it's being looked at a little bit differently in terms of how we replace that. So a service provider may not own the building. They would be the operator of the building. So this one's being looked at where the city would still have an ownership interest in owning that facility. That would be a combined facility of a day resource center, possibly in a multi-story type of building with a day resource center, and then separate sheltering for families and individuals and things like that.
Are we going to get a presentation on exactly what that campus looks like before we spend $15 million? I do, in your community survey, it looked like homelessness was kind of at the bottom of the survey for a lot of the wards, or towards the bottom.
And I can speak to that too.
Okay, I would just say that it's very preliminary at this point. All we did is some very basic costing to try to understand what it would be. And this would be, a multi-year process to look at what this.
But we would get details before we allocate the monies, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and then my second question, sorry, taking too long, on the infrastructure, I'm really kind of amazed that we are only spending 3 million on infrastructure. Can you tell me is that all that's included? Because I thought water infrastructure was part of the infrastructure package for ARPA funds. Am I getting that confused with something else?
No, it would be, water infrastructure was eligible. These were just the projects within infrastructure that were identified as things that could be implemented quickly and have an immediate impact. So there would be potential ones that would be.
Yeah, I have a real issue with when we raise water rates on our citizens, and we have not anything in here for water, yet we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars for water infrastructure, for pipelines, for, just so many water projects, but yet there's nothing in here for water. Like, was that looked at? Did water even make any recommendations?
Water did include a project, or I believe maybe even a couple of projects, and it, I guess, maybe included in the long-term recommendations. They weren't identified as things, like I said, that could be done fairly quickly. So we were really just trying to focus.
Well, and I guess overall, most of the money is going towards social services, and yet I don't really understand the actual core services that the city provides to our citizens don't seem to be in any of these buckets, because I mean, we're supposed to take care of roads, police, fire, water, critical services, and yet it's all on the social services that are really more county. I'm not saying I'm against any of this, because obviously we've prioritized helping homeless as well as some of these other areas. So I'm not saying I'm against it. I was just a little bit surprised that we didn't have more in infrastructure.
Are there, Jessica, as a follow-up to that, in all these, and as well as other staff can chime in, this is going to be one-time dollars. Are any of these one-time dollars going to establish a program, a new program that's going to have subsequent costs, operational costs to it?
Go ahead, Michael.
Within the items submitted, within the quick win piece, there are not many items that would have a long-term operating cost. Things on infrastructure might have replacement costs. The positions within the grant management would obviously have some sort of long-term cost if we continue those positions. And there are some potential cost, but no, for the vast majority of these items, it would be a one-time cost or a program that would be kind of with looking at it to explore the impact and then making a decision.
Well, I'd like you to identify which ones, because using one-time dollars for something that creates an operational liability for the city in terms of an ongoing cost just is not a smart use of this money. And so I'd like those ones specifically identified that have an ongoing cost associated to them after they're established with ARPA dollars.
So the Community Connector program, if we continue the program, would have an ongoing cost if we continue to have that staff. I can let Jessica weigh in. I think we've gone back and forth on the long-term cost of the safe outdoor space component, but that would be the other one that would potentially have an ongoing cost.
Yeah, the understanding would be that we're purchasing the infrastructure, and then the operational costs would have to come from service providers, other pieces, Medicaid, other funding strategies for these. And that's been communicated this far, and that would be something we would be very clear about in the application we put out to the community, that these are one-time really infrastructure type of costs, not for, operational needs. Some of those other, state funding or other options would be
Sure.
the operational piece.
Sure. Yeah, my concern is if it comes from our general fund. Further questions of staff?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Well, I'm sorry. I think Councilmember Gardner was next, and then Councilmember Gruber.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question is related to, I guess, what what the ask is of staff tonight. Is the expectation that we are going to agree to move this forward? And I'm asking because if so, I have concerns about that. I don't want to speak for the rest of council, but this is the first time I've seen this, and to digest, over $20 million in spending in a short presentation is difficult. And frankly, I think in some ways staff might be veering into the policymaking arena. And so I guess I want to know what the expectation is tonight. Are we expected that we're going to move this forward, or what is the ask?
For staff, staff's ask was for council to provide feedback in terms of the preliminary quick wins. Council's request at the last meeting was to come back with some ideas in terms of what we would allocate for kind of getting money into the community. So staff wanted to provide this as an initial starting point, receive council feedback, and make adjustments as necessary.
And I appreciate staff preparing this, but from my perspective, at least, I think there needs to be time to digest this. I mean, this is a lot to process, without having had it in our read ahead beforehand. So thank you.
Further questions, discussions? Councilmember River.
I have a bit of a concern about the way things are being graded. It would seem to me that the most important thing that would happen on any investment is what is the result. In other words, we will give you X amount of hundred thousands, $1 million, and as a result of it, we're going to, and then due to that money, this is the result. We have this to show for this, because again, we're talking investment money. So we're essentially buying something, whether it's a building, whether it's the tents, whether it's the temporary shelters, whatever they are. And then also some sort of discussion about return on investment. In other words, we spent this money because it was better than spending it in this other location. So I saw the evaluation criteria, and it seemed to me very soft. It was very, it was very difficult to grade. I think that if it changed to say, as a result of this proposal and as a result of council's decision to fund it, we are going to end up with something tangible. This is the result. And from a return on investment discussion, we think this is a better result than if we had spent the money over here, because in that case, we would have gotten something else, which isn't as good as the thing that we received. A discussion like that, I think, would make it easier for council to make calls as to whether or not to support or not support a particular investment.
Response by staff.
I would just note that the criteria used was, we were focusing on a couple different things. As I mentioned, two of the criteria were specifically part of the long-term process of what we have to report out on to the federal government, and within the overall intent of the funding, in terms of what the stated goals were, in terms of having an impact in helping being alleviate issues impacted by COVID-19 or made worse by COVID-19, and then just point out that it was just a framework of the process. We wanted to be able to have a process that was transparent and that people could kind of understand, but it's by no means the final decision-making process. These were going to be vetted with management, and final decisions were going to be made based on management's decision. It was just the initial process to guide the process and establish the framework.
Mayor, if I could respond.
Please.
So I appreciate that, and I think that we can say the same thing. I think we can compromise on this and pretty much say the same thing. In other words, you've got a few criteria down there that are required, or due outs to the federal government, but within those due outs, from a council perspective, it's still based on a result. We are investing X amount of dollars. This is the result. This is how that result compares against the federal guidelines, and a result that better compares to the federal guidelines as opposed to one that doesn't compare as well is obviously not the best result. The one that compares best to the federal guidelines, but the one that council can understand will have the biggest impact on the city is where we need to be. And that's the discussion I probably won't be here, but that's a discussion I think you should bring back to council, because that'll be a more robust discussion as to how the money can be best spent, the optimum way of spending the money.
Understood.
Further comments or questions on the quick wins, and then we'll go to the other section.
Berzins?
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. Yeah, I too appreciate all the time and effort that you put in. I do want to ask a question on the 880,000 payback for furlough days, the reimbursement. Does that include our police and fire?
I believe that it does, but I am not 100% sure, so I'm going to defer.
Councilmember?
Else is on the call that could weigh in.
Yeah. No, that doesn't, council member. We're having some discussions internally about police and fire. This would just cover career service employees at this point. That's the proposal. But we, like I said, we're in discussions internally about police and fire, and we would come forward with that also.
Okay. I would certainly hope you wouldn't exclude them, pay some and not pay everybody. That doesn't seem right. But you know, I just want to remind you, showed us those charts, and affordable housing seemed to be number one all across the board. But yet I don't see us spending that much money on affordable housing. It's for homeless support. So I think we need to go back and rethink some of these and send this out. This was not in our backup, or at least it wasn't in my backup. You know, could we get that so we can start thinking about it and exploring, you know, what we think of it and how we might want to change this around a little bit?
Yeah, we can send it out. I would point out we did have the $5 million for affordable housing that was included in the budget, but your point is well taken.
I mean, then you've got 15 million for something else that's not low-income housing. Okay, thank you.
Just a question to the city manager. The career civil service got days off. They're basically being paid for the furlough days, which were days that they didn't go to work. I don't believe that I think police and fire worked through the pandemic and did not get furlough days. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Okay, very well. For any further questions or comments on the quick wins?
Mayor, this is Councilmember Lawson.
Councilmember Lawson.
I do agree with my colleagues. I do think that this should be sent out so we could conceptualize, because I definitely have some questions on the 15 million for this campus. But I need to probably get more information on that. But my question is, one question I do have is, we already have Engage Aurora. So this Aurora Next is 2.0. Is that just an extenuation for this 2 million that we're going to spend for the engagement tool for residents to participate into the city process? I'm just trying to understand, is that a continuation, or are we getting rid of Engage Aurora for this Aurora Next? I'm sorry, I didn't mean 2.0, but it's an extension of this, or is it? So can someone explain that to me? What's going on with that? Is Engage Aurora not effective and we're moving to a more robust civic engagement system, or is this something different?
Something different. Aurora Next is the broad effort to, I guess, come back from the pandemic in a hybrid work environment. So the broader effort of what technology will look like and what the city's operations will look like post the pandemic.
So is this a study that's going to be done, or is this just what's in this that's $2 million so the city could come back from the pandemic?
So a significant portion would be the laptops and the hotel cube equipment that would allow the city to have the proper infrastructure for staff to have the hybrid work environment that has been conceptualized as part of the long-term plan to come back. Hotel cubes that would this would allow us to that model.
Very well.
I would just add as well, Councilmember Lawson, to make sure that our rooms are set up for community groups to come in and have their own hybrid meetings so that we can have hybrid meetings. Also having those different locations throughout the community set up for hybrid meetings. So, you know, town hall meetings could happen in that hybrid environment where people could come in and then also be at home. Also, you know, customer service centers, things like that, so that people are able to have the best customer service they can while some folks are working in the building and some are working at home. So separate from Engage Aurora, this would be, we would absolutely continue to use that tool as a engagement effort as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Further questions or comments on the quick wins?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell, then Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I do agree with my colleagues that this should be sent out to all of us for review. But I also wanted to say that I really appreciate the work that went into this, because I think from my perspective, staff did deliver what I thought that we had asked of them. We have a framework and we have some priorities that were identified through feedback from our community. I will need some more time to digest this, but I did have a question on the economic development section, specifically the restaurant assistance program and the small business grant rescue program. What I'm hearing and what I'm seeing when I go out to eat, I just was out at Star of India last night with my wife. A lot of restaurants and small businesses have customers again, but they don't have staff. They're really struggling to hire folks. I think it's a wage matter. So some of what y'all are proposing here, is that something that we'd be able to utilize that money to kind of help supplement wages to a certain extent until restaurants can actually, I guess, absorb the increased, expectation from our labor force in terms of pay?
I do believe that the restaurant assistance program included operation costs, but let me confirm that in response.
I think that's a good ARPA question, technically, to research and get back to the members. Do you have any, Councilmember McConnell? Do you have anything else?
I just one last comment, but again, I still want to digest this a little more, and maybe we can talk a little more about the housing specifically. I'm all for affordable gap financing. I mean, that's a very quick way to get shovels and dirt. But I also want to see what we can do from a longer term perspective on that. Maybe y'all have that as a separate presentation that we're about to see. But when this is all said and done, I really would like a copy of all of this so that we can have some more time to read it.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so same thing. I agree with everyone. I would like to get this. It was not in our backup, and it was really hard to read the little teeny print. Probably had my face big time in your screen. But then within that, is there any way to get a little bit more details on a couple of the things, like the Day Resource Center, just maybe what that would look like? I don't know if there's an additional piece you could put with this presentation.
Yeah, staff could add some additional context.
Thank you.
Mayor, I would offer that maybe we could send this out, send a little bit more specific description with a lot of these different projects, and then come back for the first study session in December after everybody's digested it. We could also put a little more context around the process for allocating funds out in the community. So just wanted to offer that.
I think that's a good point. No, I think definitely more detail. I happen to think it's a good starting point. And what I would encourage members to do is to, as we get more detail, to, if you think a one program or project is a priority over another, move the money around and offer that. If we use that as a basis to start a discussion, is really in effect offer that as a de facto amendment to do that and see if you get the requisite number of votes to be able to move the money around. Let's go to the next section now that we've done quick wins. Great. I mean, and let me just say the three projects that I really would hope that we would go forward with is the on the homeless issue, is working with the state on Ridgeview for transitional housing, on the Aurora Mental Health Campus to go forward with that and work with partners, leveraging those dollars with the state and with the county, and then what we can do in terms of addressing affordable housing. I think those three projects is certainly what the governor has expressed to me, a desire to work on those three projects. Further discussion on this section. I lost this We just lost the screen there. Mayor Pro Tem.
I thought we were going to get details on all of it, like including that part.
Oh, we will. I just want to see if there's any discussion right now in this section.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any discussion on this section? And we just lost I don't have the screen up on this for this.
Mayor, I think the question was around just the idea of putting forth an application to the community for those different buckets for people to submit projects. And so just getting some initial feedback on that idea and then being able to bring those projects forward. So when we come back in December, we could put some examples of what those types of projects could be. We probably wouldn't be ready to put an application out until about the first of the year.
Okay. Because obviously, I think early in the year, the legislature is going to be, from a state perspective, will be doing, making their decisions. So, further, any discussion on leveraging funding?
Mayor.
Let's see, Councilmember O'Connell, then Councilmember Coombs.
Oh, sorry. The screen went black at the time that you asked the question. So I just wanted to add one more thing, which was, and this would apply to the whole process. If we could find a way to do some better data visualization with this, I think it would help us make decisions, like to get a clear idea of how much is being spent where as a proportion, how much is left over. It helps us, and it'll also help the community understand what we're doing. So I think both of those things are important. Thank you.
Good point. Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, so I think before we decide where we're going to be sending big chunks of money, which I think this is actually the intent from staff, I think these were just kind of ideas about how leveraging may work. I think we need to have the actual detailed information and the opportunities for folks to give presentations, because we haven't received presentations from everybody that has an idea to bring forward. So I just think we need to get all the information, and that is the intent of the leveraging funding, is that it's longer term.
Further discussions?
Mayor.
Councilmember Moreno?
Yes, thank you. No, I just wanted to express my support of where this process has started. I think it's a really strong foundation. We asked staff to come up with a framework and recommendations on how we might spend some of these dollars. So I like that it's informed by some of the initiatives we already have going on that we want to really try to be effective with. I really like the idea of leveraging dollars as well. And like the fact that, this is just kind of teeing up where this conversation could go, and that we're going to have, lots of opportunity to ask more questions, to have more information. But I'm excited to see that we're trying to be strategic around leveraging other revenue sources. I know that that's something that I've heard from my colleagues, and I myself have always wanted to hear more of. And I'm excited to see that that's kind of a proactive part of the plan. And I like that we're not spending all of the money all at once, like for no reason, right? So we're being strategic about how we're accomplishing short-term goals, and then we still have money set aside for other worthy projects that might not be quite ready to go or to be funded right at this moment. So I just wanted to express that.
Thank you. I think it's a great starting point. Further discussion? Seeing none, then I think we've the direction has been given to staff in terms of providing more detail on all these specific items, and then we'll come back for further discussion. Are there any other matters to come to the study session? Seeing none, thanks everybody. Meeting adjourned.